The thing nobody in Silver Creek Valley could figure out, after, was why a man with no stake in any of it rode 12 miles in the cold to save a girl he'd spoken to exactly once. He wasn't kin. He wasn't the law. He hadn't been paid, hadn't been asked. And by every measure a sensible man applies to his own business, Ada Pruett's situation was none of his. But Cole Hatcher had stopped at the wrong ranch on the wrong night, or maybe the right one, and heard something through a plank wall that he could not work loose from his memory, no matter how many miles he put between himself and it. That's where this story starts. Not with the gunfire people expected, with a sound in the dark. October 1876, and the Silver Creek Valley had gone cold early that year. Sage came at you sideways on the wind, mixed with the smell of frost on open ground, and the stars over the muggy-on country hung sharp enough that night to cut yourself on if you looked too long. Cole Hatcher had been riding since mid-afternoon. His horse had thrown a shoe somewhere in the last 3 miles. He could feel the animal favoring the left fore, pulling its rhythm off-beat with every step. He needed a barn and a forge, or at least a dry place to wait for morning. What he found instead was a lamp burning in a window at the end of a split-rail drive. He held his lantern up to read the sign on the gatepost. Silver Creek Ranch, D. Pruett, proprietor. He was 50 yards from the porch when he heard it. Not a cry, not anything dramatic enough for that word. A sound lower than crying, a breath pushed out of someone under pressure, rhythmic and dull, like a bellows with the air mostly gone from it. Then silence. Then the creak of floor planks going still. Cole sat his horse in the dark and held very still. The sound did not come again. The window glowed amber and ordinary. A coyote called somewhere up the ridge and was not answered. He rode to the porch and knocked. Picture him there a moment. A man of 34, road-weathered, carrying nothing dramatic about him, hat in hand the way a man holds his hat at a stranger's door. Not a gunfighter's posture, not a lawman's, just a man who needed a barn. The door opened. The girl who opened it was 17, though she looked older in the way the frontier ages a person, not in wrinkles but in the weight behind the eyes. Her name was Ada Pruett, and the left side of her bottom lip had been split recently and was still swelling. She had done something with her hair, drawn it partly across that side of her face, and she held the door at an angle that kept her left cheek out of the direct lamplight. "Evening," Cole said. "My horse has gone lame on a loose shoe. I'm looking to water him and wait on morning. I can pay for feed." Ada looked at him for a moment with the specific assessment of someone who has learned fast to read a man's intentions. Then she stepped back and held the door open. "Come in," she said. "Mr. Pruett's at supper." I've thought about that sentence many times since I first heard this story. Mr. Pruett's at supper. Not my father, not even his first name, just Mr. Pruett. I don't know if Cole caught it the first time. I suspect he did. Denton Pruett was a large man, prosperous in the way that New Mexico Territory, 1876, made certain men prosperous. He had gotten there before the land prices climbed and held on with both hands. He sat at the head of a long pine table with a plate of roasted beef and cornbread, and he rose when Cole entered with the easy hospitality of a man who has no reason to fear anyone at his own table. "Sit down," he said. "Ada, bring another plate." She brought it. Her movements were exact and without waste. She poured coffee into Cole's cup without being asked and returned to the stove. Cole watched Pruett. Pruett talked about beef prices in the territory, the new railroad surveys, a land dispute with a neighbor to the north. Specific. Informed. Not unpleasant. The kind of man who gets put on the school board. The kind of man who chairs committees. Ada did not sit. She stood at the edge of the lamplight and refilled things when they needed refilling, and did not speak unless spoken to. When Pruett asked for more cornbread, she brought it without a word. When Cole thanked her, she looked at a point just past his left shoulder and said, "You're welcome," like she was reading it off a primer. Cole spent the night in the barn with his horse. He lay in the straw for a time, not sleeping, listening to the animal shift its weight in the dark and the wind working the cottonwoods along the creek. The smell of oiled leather and horse sweat and dry hay settled over him like something familiar. He thought about the sound he'd heard from 50 yards out. He thought about how a girl learns to hold a door at an angle to keep her face out of the light. He was still awake when the lantern appeared in the barn doorway at 4 in the morning. Ada stood in the opening with a bucket of feed, her coat pulled tight against the cold. She set the bucket down for the horse and turned to go. "Miss Pruett," Cole said. She stopped. "That lip needs something on it." She touched it, almost involuntarily, then put her hand down. "It's fine," she said. Cole sat up in the straw. He kept his voice even and low. "You don't have to tell me anything. I'm nobody, and I'll be gone by morning. But I'm asking anyway." Ada Pruett stood in the barn doorway with the lantern in her hand and the cold coming in around her, and the horse worked at the feed bucket, and the cottonwoods moved in the dark outside. She looked at him for a long time. "He beats me in the morning," she said, "before breakfast. At noon, when the hands go out. And at supper, if I've displeased him." She said it the way you'd tell someone what time the stage runs. Flat. Even. She had run out of a way to say it that involved feeling anything. 3 times a day, Cole said. "Most days," she said. "Less when company stays." She picked up her lantern. She walked back toward the house without looking at him again. Hold that for a moment. Most days. Less when company stays. She had done the arithmetic. She knew the variables. That's what 2 years does to a person. Turns their suffering into something they can calculate and report like weather. Cole Hatcher stood at the corral rail in the last dark hour before dawn, his saddle thrown over the fence beside him. He'd found a spare shoe in Pruett's barn supply and fitted it by feel in the dark. The valley below was black and silver, the creek running cold somewhere down through the willows, the ranch house windows going dark one by one. He stood there long enough that a hunting owl crossed above him twice. He could ride on. There was nothing legal binding him, nothing obligating him. A man passing through has no authority and no claim, and any sensible accounting of the situation put riding north at the top of the list. He saddled his horse. He rode. But not north. South, toward Ridgeline, 12 miles in the cold. And he didn't look back at the house. That was the first thing Cole Hatcher did that nobody expected. Most men looked the other way. He turned toward it instead. The road to Ridgeline at 5 in the morning in October runs through country that wants nothing to do with you. Sage flats extending until the horizon curves. Arroyos that hide themselves until you're already dropping into them. A wind off the high country that finds every gap in a coat collar and settles in. Cole Hatcher rode through all of it at a trot, his breath fogging in the early light, working through the arithmetic the same way Ada had worked through hers. Except his arithmetic was about what a man could do, not what a man could endure. Here's the thing I keep coming back to every time I tell this one. He knew going to the deputy was probably useless. He went anyway. Because doing the right thing first, the obvious road, the one that should work, is how a man proves to himself he tried before he found his own way through. And Cole Hatcher, whatever else he was precise about that kind of accounting. Deputy Orrin Mack's office sat on the east end of Ridgeline's Main Street, between a harness maker and a shuttered assay office. Mack was a broad man, running to softness at the jaw, and he was at his desk with coffee and a biscuit when Cole came through the door at 7:30. Cole told him what he'd seen. He was specific: the injuries, their stage of healing, the girl's account given verbatim, the man's name, and his property. He kept his hands flat on the desk where Mac could see them, and his voice level throughout. Mac listened with the patience of a man who has already settled on his answer before the question finishes. "Mr. Pruett," Mac said when Cole was done, "is a substantial landholder in this valley. What you're describing is a domestic matter." "It's an assault," Cole said. "Repeated. You witnessed one instance. I witnessed the cumulative results of many." Mac put down his biscuit. "Son, I've known Denton Pruett going on 9 years. He's on the Territorial Land Board. He contributes to this town's school fund." He spread his hands with the practiced reasonableness of a man who has used this gesture before. "You're a drifter. I don't even know your name." "Cole Hatcher." "Mr. Hatcher." Mac picked up his biscuit. "Mind your road." Cole minded it. Out the door, down the boardwalk 20 paces east, and through the door of Vera Glasscock's dry goods store, which was just opening its shutters for the morning. Vera Glasscock had operated a business alone in a territory without law for 16 years, and she had the eyes of a person who has not been surprised by human nature since roughly 1861. She looked at Cole when he came through the door, took him in over 4 seconds, and said, "You've been out to Silver Creek." Cole stopped. "How'd you know?" "Because men who come in here looking the way you do are either coming from there or they want whiskey, and it's too early for whiskey." She unlocked the counter gate and gestured at a stool. "Sit down." She told him what she knew. 2 years of it. Ada's mother, Joanna, had come into the store in the spring of 1874, thin, quiet, with the same flat eyes her daughter would later learn. She had married Denton Pruett 6 months after her first husband, Thomas, died of fever. A practical arrangement. Pruett had framed it as charity, and Joanna had accepted it because she had a daughter and a land claim and no way to work either one alone. Joanna had died that autumn. The doctor listed fever. Vera had her own thoughts, and she had swallowed them for 2 years, because thoughts are not evidence, and Denton Pruett sat on the land board. "The girl's been under his roof since," Vera said. "No kin alive that I know of. Her father's homestead parcel, Thomas's 40 acres on the East Creek, got folded into Pruett's holdings when Joanna passed. The girl has no money, no claim, nothing but that man between her and the open country." Cole looked at the wall of shelves behind her, flour sacks and lamp oil and coffee tins, the plain inventory of a place where people come to keep themselves alive. "Is there a judge in town?" he said. Vera studied him. "Circuit Judge Elias Thorne, monthly rounds. He's at the hotel." A pause. "He takes a long breakfast because Mrs. Hooper makes biscuits." Cole was out the door before she finished the sentence. "I think about Vera Glasscock often. She carried that knowledge for 2 years, sorted it, organized it, kept it because there was nothing yet to do with it. Then Cole Hatcher walked through her door, and she handed every piece of it over in under 10 minutes, filed and ready. She'd been waiting for someone to give it to. Judge Elias Thorne was 70, white-haired, and eating his biscuits with the focused attention of a man who understands what matters. He looked up when Cole sat down across from him uninvited and said, "You look like a man with a case and no attorney." "I've got facts," Cole said, "and a witness who'll swear to them." Thorne set down his fork. "Talk." Cole talked. He laid out Ada's account, Vera's corroboration, 2 years of documented proximity to the man. He named the specific territorial statute, the one he'd been working over in his head for 12 miles of cold road, that authorized a circuit court judge to dissolve a legal guardianship on grounds of verified physical harm, and to restore a minor's inheritance rights to court supervision until the minor reached majority. Thorne looked at him steadily. "You know territorial statute?" "I've had reason to." "Who are you?" "A man who is passing through." Outside the hotel window, Ridgeline was waking, a freight wagon on the street, someone splitting wood behind the livery, a dog working at something under a porch. Thorne looked at it a moment, then back at Cole. "Bring me the woman from the dry goods store," he said. "If her account matches yours, I'll have papers drawn before noon." While Cole crossed the street to Vera's store, while Thorne called for paper and ink, 12 miles west, in the kitchen of Silver Creek Ranch, something else was already moving. Denton Pruett received the message from Max Ryder at 9:15. He was standing at his kitchen window when the boy rode in. He read the note once, folded it, set it on the table. He went to his room and came back with his Colt single-action army on his hip and his good wool coat across his shoulders. He told his ranch hand, Colfax, to saddle 2 horses. "Where are we headed?" Colfax asked. "Ridgeline." Pruett took his hat from the hook by the door and turned it once in his hands. "Someone's making a mistake that needs correcting." He said it without heat. "That is what I need you to understand about Denton Pruett." The calm. Not bravado, not fury. The settled, absolute certainty of a man who has operated for 52 years without once being held to account for the things he's done. He could not conceive of a world where a document outweighed a gun. He had no framework for it. So he rode to Ridgeline the same way he did everything. Unhurried, certain, with his Colt loaded and his coat neat. Back in the hotel dining room, Vera Glasscock gave her sworn account and signed her name under it without a tremor. Judge Thorne's pen moved across the writ in a steady, unhurried hand. The Ada Mae Pruett guardianship dissolution, the East Creek parcel restored, the court's seal pressed into the bottom corner while the ink was still dark. Thorne held it out across the table. Cole took it, folded it twice, tucked it inside his coat against his chest, flat and warm against the oilskin lining. He stood and went to the window. Far out on the valley road, 2 riders, coming in at a canter, one of them large and straight in the saddle, riding the way a man rides when he believes he owns the ground under the horse's feet. Cole picked up his hat. He walked out of the hotel into the mid-morning light of Ridgeline's Main Street, took his position in the road, and did not draw his weapon, did not look for cover. He stood and watched the riders come. 6 people on Ridgeline's Main Street that morning told the story to anyone who'd listen for the next 20 years, and the details never changed much between them. That's how you know when a story is true. The witnesses don't have to work at it because it's already pressed into them like a brand. Denton Pruett rode in off the valley road at a controlled canter and pulled up short when he saw Cole standing in the street. Colfax came in behind him and then slowed, reading the situation with the instinct of a man who knows when he's the supporting player and not the principal. Pruett walked his horse forward 20 feet and stopped. "Move," he said. His voice carried flat on the still air. People on the boardwalk stopped. Mrs. Hooper appeared at the hotel window. The harness maker stepped out of his shop, saw what was happening, and held his position. Cole didn't move. He stood in the morning light, road-dusted coat, nothing dramatic about his posture, and reached inside his coat with his right hand. Every person on that street braced for a weapon. He pulled out a folded document. Pruett's horse shifted under him. Pruett held it with his knees and stared at the paper in Cole's hand, and something moved across his face that had not been there in a very long time. Confusion. "This is a writ," Cole said, loud enough for the boardwalk to hear, "issued this morning by Circuit Judge Elias Thorne under New Mexico Territorial Code, dissolving your legal guardianship of Ada Mae Pruett on grounds of verified physical harm. Her father's homestead parcel, 40 acres on the East Creek, is restored to her name effective today, held in court trust until she reaches majority. She can walk off your land this morning, and you have no legal authority to stop her." He held the document up so the witnesses on the boardwalk could see Thorne's seal. The street was quiet. A horse stamped somewhere down the line. A shutter banged against the hotel wall, and went still. Pruett looked down from the saddle at the paper in Cole's hand. The confusion was gone now, replaced by something harder and more familiar. "That paper," he said, "means nothing. Judge Thorne's seal on the front says otherwise." Cole stepped forward and held it out toward him. "Take it. Or don't. It's already filed at the territorial courthouse." What I think about when I picture this moment is that Denton Pruett had probably never in his life been handed a document that cost him something real. Land deals, stock papers, bill of sale, those were tools he wielded. This was a different kind of paper entirely. And some part of him, standing there on that street, knew it. He took it. He read it. His jaw set in a way that Vera Glasscock, watching from her store doorway, would later describe as a man who still believes he has the better hand. Pruett folded the writ and dropped it in the road. He reached for his Colt. He never cleared the holster. Cole's left hand came up and closed around Pruett's wrist at the exact moment the weapon broke leather. And what happened next took perhaps 2 seconds and produced a sound that the harness maker would describe for years as a green branch snapping in a vise. Pruett made a noise, short, high, cut off at the top, and the Colt hit the dirt. And Pruett sat bent over his saddle horn, cradling his right hand against his chest, his face the color of old ash. Colfax raised both hands without being asked. Judge Thorne had come out onto the hotel porch. He surveyed the Colt in the dirt, the witnesses on the boardwalk, Dupe Deputy Mack standing at the far end of the street with nowhere left to go. "Deputy Mack," Thorne said, "Mr. Pruett drew a weapon on a public road in the presence of a territorial court officer. You are looking at an arrest." Mack walked toward Pruett's horse the way a man walks toward something he knows he cannot avoid anymore. "I want to be plain about what Cole Hatcher did not do. He didn't make a speech. He didn't explain himself, didn't look to the crowd for acknowledgement. He picked Pruett's Colt up from the dirt, ejected the rounds into his palm, and handed the empty weapon to Deputy Mack. He retrieved the writ from the road, dusted it on his knee, and handed it back to Thorne. Then he walked to the hitching rail where his horse stood, checked the shoe he'd fitted in the dark that morning, and waited quietly while the deputy finished his work. Vera Glasscock rode out to Silver Creek Ranch at noon. She found Ada in the kitchen yard, hanging wash on the fence rails, a task Ada had done 300 times without anyone riding in to interrupt it. Ada turned at the sound of hooves. She watched Vera dismount. She watched her come across the yard holding something folded. Vera held it out. "It's done," she said. "The land's yours. You can go or you can stay. It's your place, not his. He's not coming back." Ada took the writ. She unfolded it and read it, top to bottom in the afternoon light. Her name was there in Thorne's careful hand. Ada May Pruett, printed on a document that existed because a man with no stake in any of it had turned south instead of north on a cold October morning. She folded it again. She held it flat against her sternum with both hands and stood like that for a moment, not looking at Vera, just holding the paper and the weight of it. She did not cry. She had done her crying, 2 years of it, in whatever corners of that house were far enough from his hearing. She had nothing left in her for that, and she didn't owe anyone a performance of relief. She walked to the fence line at the east edge of the yard and stood looking out across her father's 40 acres. The sage was going silver gray in the fall light. The creek moved through the willows below with the sound of water that does not stop just because the people near it are suffering. The mountains beyond the valley carried new snow on their upper reaches. Ada stood at that fence a long time. She didn't need to do anything else just then. Cole Hatcher paid for his horse's shoeing at the Ridgeline livery at 7 the next morning. 2 bits. He left a silver dollar and didn't wait for change. He rode north. He did not go back to Silver Creek. He did not send word. His name appears once in the territorial court records for that year as a witness signature on a guardianship dissolution writ filed the 14th of October, 1876, and not again in any record I've found. Vera Glasscock had a photograph taken that she kept behind the counter of her store until the day she died. A traveling photographer had happened to be on Ridgeline's main street that morning, setting up his wet plate equipment outside the hotel, the kind of coincidence that history depends on more than it should. The photograph shows the street, the witnesses along the boardwalk, and in the foreground, a lean man in a road-dusted coat, right hand at his side, a folded document in his left. His face is partially obscured by the angle of the light. You cannot see his expression. You can see the posture, the stillness of a man who has done what he came to do and is already beginning to leave. Nobody in Silver Creek Valley ever identified him with certainty. Just the man who had stopped at the wrong ranch on the wrong night, or the right one, and heard something through a plank wall that he couldn't put down. Ada Pruett worked her 40 acres on the East Creek until she was 61 years old. She never left the valley. She built a good house on the parcel in 1882, planted an orchard along the creek, hired 2 hands, and ran a modest cattle operation that outlasted 3 neighboring spreads. She kept one piece of paper in a tin box under her bed. Not the deed, which she kept at the bank, but the writ, the one with her name on it, in a dead man's careful hand, from a morning in October 1876, when someone she'd spoken to exactly once decided her suffering was worth 12 miles in the cold. Some men ride past the lit window, some stop and knock. Cole Hatcher knocked. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever turned toward something when it would have been easier to ride on, carry it. Share it with someone who needs that reminder tonight. There are more stories from the frontier waiting on this channel, and every one of them is worth your time. Ride with us.